Have you ever noticed how we, as adults, spend our entire lives chasing the illusion of perfection? We construct our worlds with precise measurements, flawless aesthetics, and a desperate need for external validation. We curate our lives to look immaculate from the outside, terrified of exposing the messy, uneven reality beneath the surface. Yet, in our relentless pursuit of the immaculate, we often blind ourselves to the raw, unpolished beauty that resides in the things made not with skill, but with pure, unadulterated love. We forget that the most profound emotional resonances rarely come from things that are mathematically perfect. What if the most valuable masterpiece you could ever create was the one the rest of the world deemed a disaster? What if the flaws were the exact places where the light entered? To Fluttering Moments. It is a strange and beautiful realization that some of the most profound lessons in life do not announce their arrival with grand fanfare or dramatic overtures. They slip into our lives quietly, disguised as ordinary, mundane tasks on a random, quiet evening. That was exactly how it happened when 9-year-old Leo bounded through the front door. His Cub Scout uniform was slightly rumpled from a day of endless childhood energy, and his eyes were alight with that specific brand of electricity that seems to hum in the air around him. The late afternoon sun was spilling through the living room window, casting long, golden shadows across the wooden floorboards, creating a scene of absolute suburban tranquility. I was sitting in my usual armchair, my mind tangled in the endless, exhausting scroll of adult responsibilities, financial anxieties, and the lingering weight of a long workday. It was a familiar state of being, a low-level hum of stress that many fathers come to accept as the background noise of life. The endless emails, the constant ringing of the phone, the pressure to maintain a certain standard of living, it all faded into insignificance the moment he walked into the room. Then, he shattered that quietness with an announcement that would ultimately reshape my entire understanding of pride and love. He breathlessly shared that his scout troop was organizing a grand banquet, a communal gathering of families to celebrate their achievements. The main event of this banquet was to be a highly anticipated cake auction, but there was a catch, a small, crucial detail that made his chest puff out with a sense of profound importance. The rules strictly dictated that the cakes could not be bought from a fancy bakery or a local store. They had to be baked entirely from scratch by the young scouts themselves, aided only by their fathers. It was designed as a bonding exercise, a test of teamwork, and in Leo's eyes, an epic, heroic quest that we were destined to conquer together. He spoke with such fervent passion that I could already picture us standing on a podium, receiving a golden spatula as a trophy for our unmatched culinary excellence. At that particular time in my life, I was caught in the whirlwind of modern existence, juggling deadlines, endless meetings, and the perpetual, bone-deep exhaustion that comes with trying to provide a stable foundation for a family. The kitchen was, for all intents and purposes, a completely foreign territory to me. It was a sacred domain governed effortlessly by Sarah, my wife, who moved among the pots, pans, and spices with the fluid grace of a seasoned symphony conductor. I had watched her 100 times from the doorway, silently observing her culinary magic. She possessed an intuitive understanding of flavors and textures, a secret language spoken only by those who truly belonged in that warm, aromatic space. I would watch the way she absent-mindedly tossed flour, folded delicate batter, and produced magnificent meals with an ease that suggested cooking was nothing more than an extension of her breathing. From my comfortable, passive vantage point on the periphery, it all looked deceptively simple. You follow the printed instructions, you mix the wet ingredients with the dry ones, you apply the correct amount of heat for a specific duration, and a magnificent cake naturally emerges. How complicated could it possibly be? I possessed the misguided, almost comical arrogance of a man who had never truly faced the temperamental, unforgiving science of baking. I looked down at Leo, seeing the absolute, unwavering trust radiating from his innocent 9-year-old face. It was the pure belief that his father was an invincible figure, capable of achieving anything in the world. I felt a sudden, overwhelming surge of unwarranted confidence. I promised him, right then and there, with a firm nod and a reassuring smile, that we would not just participate in this event, but that we would create something truly spectacular together. I envisioned a towering, multi-layered confection, a masterpiece of flawless sponge and immaculate frosting that would stand on the auction table as a shining testament to our father-son collaboration. I wanted to give him something to be incredibly proud of, a physical manifestation of my love for him that the whole room could see and admire. I did not know it then, blinded by my own ego and his radiant enthusiasm, but I was eagerly paving the road to a beautiful, humbling disaster. The day of the banquet approached with the stealth of a creeping tide, bringing with it a rising sense of anticipation in our household. The first step of our grand endeavor led us to the blindingly fluorescent aisles of the local grocery store. It was a maze of overwhelming choices and colorful marketing, a far cry from the serene environment I usually preferred. We stood together before the baking section, staring at rows upon rows of brightly colored cardboard boxes, each promising a shortcut to domestic perfection. We finally selected a vibrant, cheerful yellow cake mix, drawn irresistibly to the pristine, mouth-watering image of the golden, fluffy slice pictured on the exterior. It promised absolute perfection, a flawless, bakery-quality outcome, if only we followed the simple, foolproof steps printed on the back. Bringing our chosen prize home, we claimed the kitchen as our exclusive laboratory for the afternoon, shooing Sarah away with playful confidence. We were ready to conquer the culinary world. The next few hours were filled with the chaotic, rhythmic sounds of our clumsy, joyful preparation. We measured water in slightly inaccurate cups, cracked eggs against the rim of the bowl with far too much force. I spent an embarrassing amount of time fishing out tiny shards of shell with my flour-coated fingers. We whisked the pale yellow sludge together, creating a billowing cloud of fine white dust that settled over our clothes, our hair, and every available countertop. It felt as though a minor, flour-based explosion had occurred in our home, but neither of us cared in the slightest. Leo was ecstatic. His small hands were gripping the edge of the large glass bowl, his tongue poking out the corner of his mouth in deep concentration. He took his role as my loyal sous chef with the utmost seriousness, treating every stir of the whisk as a critical mission. The kitchen, usually a place of orderly creation, was transformed into a messy, laughter-filled battlefield of father-son bonding. The air was thick with the scent of raw vanilla and the unmistakable warmth of shared endeavor. Finally, with a sense of profound accomplishment, we poured the thick batter into 2 round metal tins. We carefully placed them into the preheated oven, as if we were handling fragile artifacts of immense historical value. The heavy oven door clicked shut, sealing our creation inside its fiery chamber. We leaned against the kitchen counter, shoulder to shoulder, wiping sweat and flour from our foreheads. We watched the digital timer tick down second by second. We were already tasting the sweet, inevitable victory of our endeavor. We felt like a formidable team, a unified front of masculine baking prowess, entirely oblivious to the harsh realities of culinary physics. We stood there bathed in the warm, vanilla-scented air radiating from the oven, wrapped in a false, comforting sense of security. We were deeply immersed in a shared fantasy, a delightful delusion where enthusiasm alone was enough to overcome a complete lack of technical skill or practical experience. It was a quiet, perfect moment of connection. It was a snapshot of pure joy before the inevitable, comical unraveling of our grand design. We were completely unaware that the oven door hid a reality far different from the picture on the box, and that our journey was about to take a sharply unexpected turn. But in that fleeting moment, as the timer hummed its steady rhythm, we were kings of the kitchen, and our yellow cake was destined for greatness. The sharp, sudden, piercing trill of the kitchen timer shattered the comfortable, flour-dusted illusion we had meticulously built over the past hour. It was the trumpet call of truth, signaling the end of our imaginative preparation and the arrival of harsh, physical reality. I approached the oven with a heart full of unwarranted optimism, grasping the handle with the reverence of a man about to unveil a priceless treasure. A wave of intense, vanilla-scented heat washed over my face as I pulled the door open, eager to behold the towering, golden triumphs of our father-son collaboration. Instead, my eyes met a scene that defied every expectation planted in my mind by that cheerful cardboard box. The cakes had not risen. They had not transformed into the light, airy, cloud-like sponges promised by the glossy photograph. They sat there in their metal confines, heavy, dense, and stubbornly flat, reaching barely halfway up the sides of the tins. It was a profound betrayal of culinary physics, a stark and immediate lesson in the chasm that often exists between our grandest intentions and the humble, flawed reality of our actual capabilities. I stood there for a long moment, the oven door still ajar, trying to process the visual evidence of our failure. The human mind is a remarkable instrument when it comes to protecting the ego, capable of spinning rapid, complex rationalizations to shield itself from disappointment. Within seconds, I found myself quietly justifying the heavy, unyielding discs of baked dough. I convinced myself, through sheer willpower and paternal desperation, that perhaps the most sophisticated, artisanal cakes in the world were actually meant to be this modest in stature. Perhaps fluffiness was merely a commercial gimmick, and true, robust flavor resided in density. I looked over at Leo, fully expecting to see the light of anticipation extinguished from his eyes, replaced by the crushing weight of a ruined project. But as I observed his face, I found no trace of disappointment. He was completely unfazed, his eyes still shining with that same unwavering, joyful pride. To him, the height of the cake was utterly irrelevant. He did not see a failed chemical reaction. He saw the tangible, edible proof of an afternoon spent working side by side with his father. His innocent, unburdened acceptance of our flawed creation began to work a quiet magic on my own turbulent emotions. If he was proud of this dense, golden puck, then I would be proud of it too. We carefully extracted the tins, our movements filled with a renewed, albeit slightly delusional, sense of accomplishment. The next logical step in our architectural endeavor was to stack the two sad, heavy layers atop one another. It was during this delicate maneuvering that a sudden, icy realization struck me with the force of a physical blow. In our singular, obsessive focus on the cake batter, we had completely neglected the glue that would hold our masterpiece together, the crowning glory that would hide its imperfections. We had absolutely no frosting. We needed a thick, sweet layer of jam or icing to bind the layers and drape over the exterior, and our kitchen cupboards were entirely devoid of such necessities. Panic, sharp and metallic, began to bloom in my chest as the kitchen clock ticked mercilessly toward the immovable deadline of the banquet. My culinary ignorance, which had been merely amusing earlier, now became a critical liability. Driven by panic, my mind grasped at desperate, illogical solutions. I knew we had standard, granular sugar in the pantry, and I formed a frantic, silent hypothesis that surely sugar was simply sugar. I imagined I could somehow melt it down, or mix it with water, and magically conjure a smooth, professional glaze through sheer force of will. I was standing there, staring intensely at a bag of white sugar, about to commit a catastrophic kitchen error, when Sarah's gentle presence graced the doorway. She did not mock our predicament, nor did she point out the obvious absurdity of my improvised frosting theories. Instead, she offered a soft, quiet intervention, explaining with infinite patience that standard granulated sugar possessed neither the texture nor the chemical properties required to create a viable cake covering. Her words dismantled my desperate plan completely, leaving us with only one viable, albeit slightly humiliating, option if we were to salvage the evening. With the clock dictating our every move, I abandoned the sanctity of our from-scratch mandate. I burst out of the front door, leaving a trail of flour in my wake, and executed a frantic, adrenaline-fueled dash to the nearest supermarket. The urgency of a father trying to save his son's moment of glory is a powerful force, propelling me through the aisles with a singular, desperate focus. I bypassed the raw ingredients and grabbed a plastic tub of pre-made, commercially processed vanilla frosting, sacrificing our artisanal integrity on the altar of sheer survival. I practically flew back into the house, breathless, clutching the plastic tub like a hard-won trophy. The application of this artificial savior was far removed from the elegant, sweeping motions of pastry chefs I had seen on television. It felt significantly less like delicate culinary artistry and much more akin to the utilitarian task of applying spackle to a damaged ceiling. The frosting in the tub was finite, and our cake, despite its lack of height, seemed to possess a surprisingly expansive surface area. We stretched the sweet paste as thin as physically possible, scraping the plastic spatula across the baked surface in desperate, uneven strokes. The resulting coat was tragically thin, leaving translucent patches that starkly revealed the golden, uneven texture of the cake beneath. It was a patchwork job, a frantic attempt to cover our shortcomings with a thin veil of processed sugar. To complete our chaotic masterpiece, I scattered a handful of small, brightly colored sprinkles across the top, hoping the vibrant dots would distract the eye from the structural devastation below. We stepped back, our hands sticky and our aprons ruined, to admire the final product. We exchanged a look, a shared, triumphant smile that communicated a deep, unspoken solidarity. Through the incredibly biased, love-tinted lenses of our shared experience, the cake was beautiful. It was a testament to our survival, a physical monument to our afternoon of chaos. When Sarah walked back into the kitchen, she looked at the cake, then at our beaming, expectant faces, and offered a warm, affirming smile. She acknowledged the effort, noting that it looked quite lovely and would surely taste wonderful. Wrapped tightly in this warm cocoon of familial affirmation, I remained blissfully, completely blind to the glaring, undeniable fact that our creation was hopelessly, almost comically lopsided. It was only later, confined within the moving sanctuary of our car as we hurried through the evening streets toward the banquet hall, that the fragile bubble of my confidence was abruptly punctured. The atmosphere in the vehicle was thick with nervous excitement, Leo balancing the cake box carefully on his lap. Then, with the casual, innocent tone of a child recounting a minor detail of their day, he dropped a piece of information that chilled me to the bone. He cheerfully mentioned that the beautiful cakes we had spent the afternoon laboring over were not simply going to be sliced and shared amongst friends. They were going to be the centerpiece of a public auction. The words echoed in the confined space of the car, fundamentally altering the reality of our situation. The rules of engagement had suddenly, drastically changed. This was no longer a private family endeavor or a simple communal potluck. This was a public exhibition of worth. Our lopsided, patchworked, inadequately frosted creation was going to be placed on a pedestal, scrutinized by hundreds of eyes, judged against the creations of others, and assigned a literal, monetary value. A crushing, suffocating weight of regret instantly descended upon my shoulders. In that fleeting, agonizing moment as the venue came into view, I wished with every fiber of my being that I had taken this task seriously, that we had more time, that I could somehow turn the car around and protect my son from the inevitable, crushing judgment of the outside world. The heavy wooden doors of the community banquet hall swung open, releasing a wave of warm, humid air, heavily scented with the savory aroma of a communal dinner and the sharp, echoing cacophony of 100 overlapping conversations. Stepping across that threshold felt less like entering a celebratory gathering and more like walking into a glaring, unforgiving arena. The ambient noise of the crowd hit me like a physical force, a wall of sound that instantly heightened the nervous energy already humming in my veins. The hall was packed to the brim with families, a sea of unfamiliar faces illuminated by the harsh, overhead fluorescent lights that seemed to cast long, judgmental shadows over everything. I stood near the entrance for a fleeting second, the flimsy cardboard box containing our culinary creation suddenly feeling as heavy and volatile as an unexploded bomb in my trembling hands. My heart began to drum, a frantic, irregular rhythm against my ribs. I desperately wanted to turn around, to march Leo right back out into the cool, forgiving darkness of the evening. But the relentless momentum of the crowd, pushing in behind us, forced us deeper into the brightly lit room. Our path naturally led us toward the focal point of the evening, the undeniable epicenter of the room's nervous energy. There, stretching across the far wall, was a massive, impossibly long banquet table, covered in a pristine white linen cloth. It was not merely a table, it was an altar, upon which the domestic prowess of every family in the troupe was laid bare for public consumption. As my eyes adjusted to the sheer spectacle before me, a cold, sickening dread began to pool in the pit of my stomach, a heavy weight that anchored my feet to the floor. The creations displayed on that white linen were not mere cakes. They were breathtaking works of edible architecture, astonishing feats of sugar-spun engineering that defied logic and mocked my frantic, pathetic grocery store dash. I stared in silent, absolute horror at the meticulous details of our competition. There were cakes sculpted into the precise, geometric shapes of Native American teepees, their surfaces adorned with intricate, hand-painted symbols. Beside them sat cakes shaped like sleek, aerodynamic jet planes and towering, flawlessly frosted hats. The level of artistry was staggering. One cake was a perfect, rippling replica of the American flag, its colors vibrant and true, while another depicted an entire miniature landscape, complete with tiny, edible figures of humans and animals, frozen in mid-stride. I saw smooth, glassy glazes that reflected the overhead lights, delicate pipings of buttercream that looked like antique lace, and strategic placements of glossy cherries, marzipan mushrooms, and sparkling jewel-like candies. These masterpieces were proudly displayed on heavy, expensive porcelain platters, resting in elaborate decorative stands, or nestled within custom-built dioramas, recreating scenes from Star Wars and famous historical battles. The architecture of my insecurity was built in a matter of seconds, brick by terrible brick, as I surveyed this landscape of impossible perfection. A bitter, sinking realization washed over me. I had fundamentally misunderstood the assignment. I had treated this as a chaotic, joyful afternoon of father-son bonding, completely oblivious to the unwritten, unspoken reality of the situation. This was not a children's activity. This was an intense, fiercely competitive exhibition of parental capability. My mind began to race, desperately trying to construct a narrative that would excuse my catastrophic failure. I looked at the flawless creations and told myself that these fathers must have cheated. Surely they had enlisted the help of their impossibly talented wives, master decorators, or even creative engineers to produce such astonishing results. It was a comforting lie, a flimsy shield to protect my fragile ego from the undeniable truth. I had walked into a metaphorical gunfight, armed with a dull, plastic butter knife. I felt a profound sense of alienation, a sudden, piercing awareness that we had wandered into the wrong room, the wrong event, perhaps even the wrong community. The air grew thick and difficult to breathe. I was no longer a proud father. I was an imposter, about to be brutally exposed on a public stage. Amidst my internal collapse, Leo remained entirely, blissfully insulated from the toxic radiation of adult comparison. He navigated the crowded room with the confident, purposeful stride of a conquering hero, returning with the spoils of war. Finding the main table utterly overflowing with artisanal masterpieces, he did not retreat. Instead, he marched toward the back of the room, locating a small, unoccupied space on the mantel of an old, unused brick fireplace. With a reverence that shattered my heart into 1,000 microscopic pieces, he carefully lifted our creation from its cardboard prison. He placed it squarely on the mantel, resting upon the cheap, flimsy paper plate that we had hastily dusted with leftover granulated sugar. Then came the moment that solidified our tragedy. With the utmost care, he reached out to remove the clear cellophane wrap I had used to cover it during the car ride. The room seemed to move in agonizing slow motion. The cellophane, predictably, had adhered fiercely to the thin, patchy layer of store-bought frosting. As Leo pulled, the plastic did not peel away cleanly. It fought back, tearing away irregular chunks of the yellow cake surface with it. What was already a lopsided, poorly frosted mound was instantly transformed into a pockmarked, cratered disaster. The bright yellow interior of the dry sponge shone through the ragged holes in the frosting like a neon sign advertising our incompetence. My face burned with an intense, consuming heat, a primal flush of shame that rushed from my collar to the tips of my ears. I watched his every movement, paralyzed by embarrassment, waiting for the devastating realization to hit him. But as he looked down at the ruined, lumpy surface, his expression did not falter. He did not feel a single ounce of the crushing mortification that was currently suffocating me. Panic, sharp and desperate, finally broke through my paralysis. The urge to protect him, or perhaps, more honestly, to protect myself from the impending public humiliation, became overwhelming. I leaned down, my voice a strained, urgent whisper meant only for his ears. I tried to casually suggest, with a forced, unnatural smile, that perhaps we shouldn't participate in the auction after all, that maybe we should just take our masterpiece home and enjoy it privately. I was practically begging him to let us flee into the night, but my frantic, cowardly words were instantly swallowed by a sudden, deafening roar from the crowd. The hall erupted in enthusiastic applause and cheers as a group of stern-looking scoutmasters, dressed immaculately in their crisp green uniforms, marched through the main doors. The ceremony was beginning. The trap had officially snapped shut, and there was absolutely no escape from the agonizing judgment that awaited us. The cacophony of the crowded hall eventually settled into a tense, expectant murmur as a stern-looking woman, exuding an aura of absolute authority and efficiency, stepped to the microphone to outline the evening's protocol. The rules, as they echoed through the crackling PA system, were simple, but possessed a cruel, isolating twist. Only the young Cub Scouts themselves were permitted to approach the auction block, navigate the bidding floor, and place their offers. The adults, the architects of these sugary monuments, were relegated to the role of mere spectators and silent financiers of this miniature economy. Sensing the impending disaster and the absolute necessity for damage control, I quickly fished into my wallet. I pulled out $8, every crumpled bill I had on my person at that moment, and pressed the small wad of cash into Leo's eager, waiting palm. I leaned down, bringing my face close to his, my voice laced with a desperate, quiet urgency that I hoped he would understand. I instructed him to aim low, to keep his bids remarkably conservative, secretly praying with every fiber of my being that he would simply blend into the chaotic background, save his money, and allow our catastrophic creation to pass by, entirely unnoticed by the masses. As he bounded away, disappearing into the shifting, excited mass of uniformed boys gathering near the front of the stage, a dark, incredibly cowardly thought took deep root in my panicked mind. I sat in my uncomfortable folding chair, surrounded by the chatter of confident parents, and began to mentally map out a desperate trajectory through the crowded room. I calculated the distance to the fireplace mantel where our cake sat exposed and vulnerable. I reasoned that if I moved quickly enough, feigning a clumsy, unfortunate stumble, I could accidentally bump heavily into the brick ledge. It would be a terribly messy, ungraceful solution, and I would certainly look like a clumsy fool. But a ruined, smashed cake on the floor, swept up by a janitor, was infinitely preferable to the agonizing public dissection of our failure. It was a desperate act of paternal sabotage, a willingness to humiliate myself physically just to completely shield my boy from the psychological blow of public ridicule. However, fate, it seemed, was determined to hold me accountable. My covert operation was instantly thwarted when a formidable, sharp-eyed woman decisively claimed the empty seat directly to my right. Her intense, unblinking gaze seemed to bore straight into my soul, instantly paralyzing my limbs and silently vetoing any erratic movements. I was securely trapped in my seat, condemned to bear silent witness to the unfolding tragedy. The auctioneer, a man with a booming theatrical voice and the polished flair of a seasoned showman, launched into his routine. He held aloft the first masterpiece, a magnificent multi-tiered wonder of bright pastel colors and delicate, intricate piping, describing its flawless design with the breathless reverence of an art appraiser unveiling a lost Renaissance painting. The bidding opened with frantic enthusiasm. 75 cents, 80 cents, $1, sold for $1 to the young man in the front. The prices, to my absolute astonishment, were incredibly modest, a stark, almost insulting contrast to the immense labor, skill, and sheer artistry that had clearly gone into these confections. Cake after beautiful cake was presented to the crowd, lavishly praised by the auctioneer and sold for mere pocket change. With every successful, celebrated sale, a heavy, cold knot tightened further in my stomach. The disparity between these edible works of art and the sad, lopsided, yellow-spotted lump waiting patiently on the distant mantel was becoming agonizingly, painfully clear to anyone with eyes. Then, the true nightmare began. It started as a low, barely perceptible rustle, a subtle but undeniable shift in the ambient noise of the room. It was the distinct sound of collective attention shifting away from the main stage and toward the back of the hall, toward the solitary, pathetic object resting on the brick ledge. The whispers snaked through the tight rows of folding chairs, infectious, rapid, and inherently cruel. My ears, hyper-tuned by a suffocating anxiety, began to catch the fragmented, venomous words floating in the warm air. People were pointing, their eyes tracing the jagged, uneven craters where the cellophane had violently ripped away our meager layer of frosting. "Look at those strange yellow spots," a voice murmured nearby, dripping with confusion and mild disgust. Then, from a group of older, cynical teenagers slouching in the row directly behind me, came the fatal, devastating blow. They snickered, a harsh, grating sound that cut through the background noise, and one of them ruthlessly, jokingly dubbed our creation the leprosy cake. The cruel moniker was a spark in dry grass, igniting a wave of muffled, agonizing laughter that rippled rapidly through the immediate vicinity, causing faces to turn away in an attempt to hide their mocking smiles. My heart physically ached. It was a sharp, piercing pain that radiated outward from the center of my chest, making it difficult to draw a full breath. An overwhelming wave of profound, suffocating sorrow washed over me, not for myself or my bruised ego, but entirely for Leo. He was out there somewhere in that chaotic sea of energetic boys, completely oblivious to the brutal fact that his pride and joy, the physical manifestation of our entire afternoon together, had just become the undisputed laughingstock of the entire community. The fierce, primal, protective instinct to throw myself over him, to physically shield his innocent heart from this casual, devastating cruelty of the adult world, was paralyzing in its intensity. Yet, I was anchored to my chair, entirely powerless to intervene, forced to watch the train wreck in slow motion. The inevitable, dreadful moment finally arrived. It was the final item of the long evening. The auctioneer, still riding a high wave of jovial momentum and practiced charm, approached the fireplace mantel. He reached out with both hands and confidently grasped the edges of the flimsy paper plate holding our cake. As he lifted our creation into the air to present it to the crowd, the true, unvarnished extent of its tragedy was magnified tenfold. The cheap paper immediately buckled and warped under the surprisingly dense, leaden weight of the unrisen sponge. The entire structural integrity of the cake tilted dangerously to one side. From my vantage point, it was a scene of pure, unadulterated horror. Tiny, pathetic flakes of the store-bought frosting, dried and brittle under the harsh, unforgiving glare of the overhead fluorescent lights, rained down onto the floor like a sad, sugary snowfall. The bright illumination caught every single divot, every uneven crater, exposing the neon yellow interior of the dry cake with agonizing clarity. The auctioneer, a man who had spent the last hour spinning incredibly eloquent, poetic descriptions of sugar-spun dreams and flawless buttercream, stopped dead in his tracks. His practiced, professional smile simply vanished, instantly replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated bewilderment and profound confusion. He stared at the object in his hands as if it were an alien artifact. He opened his mouth, clearly searching his extensive vocabulary for a polite way to describe this disaster. But for a long, agonizing second, absolutely no sound emerged. The entire room fell into a heavy, suffocating silence, a collective holding of breath as hundreds of judgmental eyes stared at the disastrous offering. It was the heavy silence that precedes an execution. But before the auctioneer could fumble for a diplomatic phrase, before the cruel crowd could erupt into open, unrestrained mockery, a single voice shattered the quiet. It was high, remarkably clear, and vibrating with an unshakable, fierce, and absolute pride. $8! The shout echoed powerfully off the high ceiling, ringing with undeniable authority. It was Leo. He hadn't waited for an opening bid of 50 cents. He hadn't hesitated for a fraction of a second. In a room full of people measuring worth in aesthetic perfection and spare change, my son had just loudly, fiercely claimed his masterpiece, throwing every single cent he possessed into the air to ensure that this cake, our cake, belonged to absolutely no one else. The silence that followed that astronomical bid was absolute. A heavy, stunned quiet that swept through the banquet hall like a physical wave. In a room where architectural wonders of spun sugar and flawless buttercream had just been auctioned away for 75 cents, or a singular dollar bill, the sheer, staggering magnitude of an $8 opening bid was entirely incomprehensible to the adult minds present. The auctioneer, still holding our lopsided, crumb-shedding creation suspended in the air, blinked rapidly, his mouth opening and closing as he tried to process the sudden disruption in his carefully orchestrated routine. He looked past the glaring overhead lights, scanning the sea of faces to locate the source of this absurd, unprecedented financial commitment. He stammered, the smooth, theatrical cadence of his voice entirely shattered by genuine bewilderment. Before he could even finish his sentence to confirm the amount, before anyone else in the room could fully recover from the shock and offer a counterbid, Leo was already in motion. He practically launched himself from the back of the crowd, a small, determined blur of green uniform darting swiftly through the narrow aisles of folding chairs. He was not running to save face, nor was he running out of embarrassment. He was running to claim his rightful prize. He reached the front of the room with a wide, radiant, gap-toothed grin plastered across his face, entirely immune to the hundreds of bewildered eyes tracking his every movement. I sat frozen in my seat, my heart pounding a frantic, erratic rhythm against my ribs, watching in absolute awe as my son fearlessly approached the auctioneer. He did not look at the other magnificent cakes resting on their expensive platters. He did not seem to notice the way the harsh lights highlighted the disastrous, cratered surface of our own creation, or the way the cheap paper plate continued to buckle ominously under its dense weight. All he saw was the physical culmination of our afternoon, the tangible, undeniable proof of our father-son alliance. With a possessive, triumphant joy, he reached out and casually swiped a tiny bit of the remaining frosting with his index finger, popping it into his mouth with undeniable satisfaction. Then, he turned to the boys standing nearest to the stage. The very same boys whose parents had likely spent hours agonizing over perfectly smooth fondant and intricate royal icing decorations. He did not shrink away from them in shame. Instead, he puffed out his chest, his voice ringing with an absolute unshakable boasting that cut through the lingering silence. He proudly declared to his peers that this was our cake, his eyes shining with an inner, fierce light that no amount of public mockery could ever extinguish. He proudly announced that his father and he had made it together, turning a statement of fact into a bold declaration of victory. He handed over the crumpled wad of single-dollar bills to the stunned official, taking careful possession of the flimsy paper plate, as if he were receiving a delicate crown of immeasurable worth. He turned back toward the crowd, spotted me sitting paralyzed in the middle row, and shouted over the rising murmur of the hall that he had bought it. In that singular, crystal-clear moment, a profound and permanent shift occurred within my own heart. The heavy, suffocating blanket of adult shame and social anxiety that had been crushing my chest for the past hour instantly dissolved, burned away completely by the sheer, blinding radiance of my son's unconditional pride. I had spent the entire evening looking at our cake through the unforgiving, hypercritical lens of societal expectation and comparative worth. I had allowed the superficial judgments of strangers and the cruel whispers of teenagers to dictate the value of something that was born purely out of love and shared time. But looking at Leo, standing there so fiercely proud, so entirely unaffected by the superficial aesthetics that obsessed the rest of the room, I finally understood the tragic depth of my own blindness. He did not see a leprosy cake. He did not see a failure of culinary science or a monument to my incompetence. He saw an edible testament to the chaotic, laughter-filled hours we had spent covered in flour in our kitchen. His innocent love was an absolute armor, entirely impenetrable to the cynical whispers of the world around him. The drive home that evening was a stark, beautiful contrast to the anxious, tension-filled journey that had preceded it. The suffocating, judgmental pressure of the banquet hall was gone, replaced by the quiet, intimate sanctuary of our family car, moving steadily through the darkened suburban streets. The rhythmic hum of the engine and the soft glow of the passing streetlights, casting long shadows across the interior, created an atmosphere of deep, reflective peace. Leo sat beside me in the passenger seat, treating the cardboard box on his lap with the utmost reverence. He kept both hands firmly planted on either side of it, acting as a human shock absorber against every minor bump and turn in the road. The silence between us was not empty. It was rich and heavy with unspoken emotion, a quiet, shared celebration of a victory that only the two of us truly understood. As we turned onto our street, bathed in the soft, yellow light of the corner lamp, I finally found the voice to ask the question that had been echoing in my mind since that shocking moment at the auction block. I glanced over at him, his small face illuminated by the dim dashboard lights, and asked softly why he had offered his entire $8 right away. I gently reminded him that he could have started with a much smaller bid, saving some of his allowance. He did not even pause to consider his answer. He did not offer a strategic, calculated explanation for his bidding tactics. He simply looked at me, his eyes wide and perfectly clear, and delivered a truth so profoundly simple, it brought a sudden, sharp sting of tears to my eyes. He replied softly, without a single trace of hesitation, that he simply did not want anyone else to have our cake. Our cake. Those two simple words resonated in the quiet space of the car, carrying the weight of a profound, life-altering revelation. It was not just a dessert anymore. It was our shared history, our chaotic afternoon, our messy, imperfect, fiercely guarded love, baked into a dense, yellow form. When we finally walked back through our front door, the house was quiet, warm, and deeply welcoming. We carried our battered prize into the kitchen, the very site of its dramatic creation, and carefully set it down on the counter. We did not bother with fancy dessert plates or polished silver forks. We simply stood there, father and son, bathed in the warm light of the kitchen, and cut thick, uneven slices from the heavy mass. As I took my first bite, a strange and wonderful thing happened. The dryness of the sponge, the artificial sweetness of the sparse frosting, the sheer density of the thing, none of it mattered. It tasted like triumph. It tasted like absolute, unconditional acceptance. I looked at the lopsided, pockmarked surface, and for the very first time that entire evening, I did not see a failure. I saw exactly what my son had seen all along. Through the clarifying lens of his love, it was, without a single doubt, the most beautiful, perfect cake I had ever seen in my life. The memory of that warm, slightly dry, intensely sweet yellow cake has faded into the distant corridors of the past. Yet the profound emotional resonance of that quiet evening in our kitchen remains permanently etched into the very foundation of my soul. It is a memory I revisit often, especially during those inevitable moments when the harsh, demanding complexities of the adult world threaten to overwhelm my sense of peace. The physical cake was consumed in a matter of days, entirely devoured by a father and son who had suddenly discovered the secret ingredient that transforms a culinary disaster into an absolute triumph. But the lesson it imparted, the quiet, earth-shattering realization about the true nature of value and perfection, has nourished me for a lifetime. We spend so much of our fleeting time on this earth, desperately trying to construct the flawless facades that society expects of us. We exhaust our spirits, trying to meticulously frost over our insecurities, our past failures, and our inherent human messiness, terrified that if we expose the uneven, unrisen parts of our true selves, we will be met with the same mocking laughter that echoed through that banquet hall. We live in a world that operates very much like that crowded, brightly lit room, a constant, exhausting auction block where our worth is perpetually measured against the seemingly flawless achievements of those around us. We are conditioned from a painfully young age to believe that value is an objective metric, something assigned to us by external observers, judges, and the collective whispers of the crowd. We learn to equate our lovability with our success, our physical appearance, our wealth, and our ability to seamlessly conform to an impossible standard of pristine beauty. In doing so, we become our own harshest critics, standing in the shadows and looking at our own imperfect lives with deep, suffocating shame. We look at the metaphorical cakes we have baked, our relationships, our careers, our artistic endeavors, our very personalities, and we focus entirely on the torn frosting, the lopsided architecture, and the glaring yellow spots of our incompetence. We convince ourselves that because we are not mathematically perfect, because we do not resemble the glossy image on the front of the box, we are somehow unworthy of taking up space on the mantelpiece of life. What Leo taught me that night, with his 8 crumpled dollar bills and his fierce, unyielding smile, was the extraordinary, transformative power of subjective value. He possessed a kind of pure, untainted emotional alchemy that allowed him to look directly at a disaster and see a masterpiece. His love was not conditional. It was not tethered to the structural integrity of the sponge or the smoothness of the glaze. His love was rooted entirely in the unseen, intangible hours we had spent laughing in a cloud of white flour, the shared struggle, and the clumsy, beautiful attempt at creation. He understood instinctively what I, in all my adult wisdom, had completely forgotten: that the things we create with our hearts, the things we pour our genuine effort and vulnerable love into, carry a weight and a significance that can never be diminished by the shallow judgments of strangers. He did not buy a cake that night. He bought a memory. He rescued our shared vulnerability from the harsh glare of public scrutiny and claimed it as a priceless treasure, demonstrating that true belonging and authentic pride are never found in the pursuit of perfection, but in the fierce, unshakable acceptance of our flaws. This brings us to a quiet, delicate question that we must all eventually ask ourselves in the stillness of our own hearts. How often do we abandon our own creations, our own dreams, or even our own authentic selves, simply because we fear the whispering crowd? How many times have we hidden our truest passions, our most vulnerable art, or our deepest affections because they felt too rough, too unpolished, too susceptible to the mocking title of a leprosy cake? We must learn to cultivate the same fierce, protective love for ourselves that Leo had for that lopsided dessert. We must learn to become the 9-year-old child standing in the center of a judgmental room, looking at our battered, imperfect lives and declaring with absolute, unshakable pride that we would not trade our unique, flawed journey for anyone else's flawless illusion. It is a journey of unlearning the toxic metrics of the world and remembering the pure, heart-centered vision we all once possessed before the world taught us to be ashamed. When you learn to look at your life through the lens of compassion rather than criticism, the entire landscape of your reality begins to softly shift. The broken pieces of your history, the failed attempts, the clumsy mistakes, they no longer look like structural damage that needs to be frantically spackled over and hidden from view. Instead, they become the very texture of your unique humanity, the specific, beautiful characteristics that make your story entirely your own. Just like the ancient Japanese art of kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired with seams of bright gold to highlight the history of the object rather than disguise it, we must learn to fill the cracks and craters of our own lives with the golden light of self-compassion. We must realize that our value does not decrease because we are imperfect. Our value is inherently forged in the very fires of our imperfection and our continuous brave attempts to simply try again. As we bring this chapter to a close, I invite you to take a deep, cleansing breath and look at the imperfect, lopsided creations in your own life with a renewed sense of tenderness and grace. Give yourself the profound permission to be unfinished, to be messy, and to be gloriously, wonderfully human. If this story of Thomas and Leo has touched a quiet corner of your heart today, if it has gently reminded you of the profound beauty hidden within life's inevitable imperfections, I kindly encourage you to share your thoughts and your own stories in the comments section below. Have you ever had a moment where someone looked at your flaws and saw a masterpiece? Or perhaps you are currently on the brave journey of learning to be that person for yourself. Your stories of healing and acceptance create a beautiful ripple effect in this community. Please consider leaving a like to support this message of self-compassion and subscribe to our channel to join us for more deep, reflective journeys into the human spirit. Thank you, truly and deeply, for spending your valuable time with us, for opening your mind to these gentle reflections, and for allowing these words to find a home in your day. Until we meet again, may you always find the courage to love your imperfect creations, and may your days be filled with countless, beautiful, fluttering moments.